Welcome to the Stellar Vault. Say hi in the comments to awaken the archive. Then like, subscribe, and let the tale begin.
The first human to die didn't see the shot. He just blinked, and the sky turned white. The mine at Sector 7 was gone before anyone understood what was happening. A precision orbital strike, the kind used on hardened military targets, not on miners, not on welders, not on children. A 3-second burn from orbit turned iron scaffolding into slag and vaporized 37 colonists where they stood. Dust rose in a sick plume, curling into Kavarna 4's thin atmosphere like a signal flare for the end of the world. Above them, the alien ships drifted into low orbit like shadows peeled from the void. 6 hulls, no insignias, no lights, just burn metal surfaces, wide and flat, like someone carved up a moon and told it to move. The colony's sky turned black, and then the message came. Short range, wideband, brutal. Humans, surrender or die. Inside the comm center at Low Point, Chief Tech Officer Meki Solance was already cursing by the time the signal hit. He worked the console quickly, rerouting auxiliary power into the dish array. Static buzzed like hornets across every screen. Counselor Richmond, I'm bouncing the distress through band 9. Power's unstable. Get it out. Nova 3 has to know what's happening. Richmond stood with his arms behind his back, jaw set like granite. His voice didn't shake, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he knew a room full of operators needed something to anchor to. Meki triggered the burst. The emergency transmission flared from the comm tower like a spear of light, aimed directly at Nova 3's orbital platform, 13.6 light-minutes away. It never made it. Because at that same time, TRN 876, known as the Rift, awoke. A black hole system dormant for 30 years chose that moment to wake. The implosion wasn't violent. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet. A spatial inversion ripple collapsed the Rift's unstable edge and chewed a hole through the fabric of subspace wide enough to swallow a moon. It ate light. It ate gravity. It ate signal. The distress call from Kavarna 4 was consumed less than 2 minutes into its journey. No one at Low Point knew. They kept watching the skies, waiting for confirmation, hoping for the return ping, waiting for Nova 3 to say, "Help is on the way." Instead, Kavarna 4 got silence, and above them, the alien ships began to descend. Counselor Harlan Richmond didn't wait for a second strike. "Wake everyone. Start moving civilians to the bunkers. I want every engineer and mechanic at dry dock. Mikai, how bad is Praga?" Meki's mouth was dry. Reactors down to 48%. Half the nav arrays fried. But she'll fly. "She doesn't need to fly," Richmond said. "She just needs to fight." Across the colony, alarms began to howl, long and low. The kind of sound that doesn't fade from memory. The kind that means run. The kind that means survive. In Dock 3, under layers of dust and sheet metal, TSV Praga came online for the first time in 17 years. Her frame groaned. Her core sputtered. Her lights flickered. And somewhere deep in Kavarna 4, Daniel, a boy too young to fight, too old to hide, looked up and saw the ships coming. He didn't know their names. He didn't care, because when the sky burned, names didn't matter. Help was not coming. The Rift had eaten their signal, and all that stood between extinction and survival were 2 broken ships and a colony that refused to kneel. The air in the bunker didn't move. It tasted like recycled panic and old steel. Daniel sat pressed against the curved wall, knees to his chest. He hadn't said a word since the ships came. Since he'd watched them from the rooftop, every part of him locked in place while the sky turned white. This wasn't quiet. It was silence. Real, heavy, The kind that settled in your ears and made the world feel like it had ended without telling you. He didn't know the name of the girl sitting beside him. She was maybe 6. Dried blood crusted across her forehead in a line shaped like a crack. She hadn't spoken since the alarm, just kept clutching a stuffed animal that was missing an arm. Somewhere above them, Kavarna-4's surface groaned under its own stillness. No one knew if another strike was coming. No one asked. They all just waited. Then came the sound. Not loud, not sharp. It was worse, wrong. A low, drawn-out hum, deep enough to feel in your ribs. It vibrated through the bunker floor like something enormous was passing overhead. Daniel's fingers clenched around his pant leg. A baby started crying 2 rows down. Someone hissed for silence, but the fear had already rippled out like a fuse catching flame. Then the lights flickered. A woman near the entrance cursed under her breath. The emergency systems kicked in with a whine, casting the entire chamber in flickering amber. Daniel looked at the girl beside him. She didn't cry. She didn't move. Just kept holding on. That sound again. A deeper pass. This time, closer. Above ground, the dust hadn't settled. Columns of ash still curled from the crater that had been Sector 7. The air smelled like scorched rock and burned insulation. Counselor Harlan Richmond stood atop a flatbed hauler near the west gate, boots coated in black dust, watching the horizon like it might lie to him. Confirm that pass. I want vector, speed, and angle of descent. Below him, McKee Solence's hands moved like a man working 2 consoles and holding back a panic attack. Already did. It's not orbital fire. This was a scan run. Atmospheric drag kicked in. Whoever's flying that thing dropped closer than they should have. Scouting. Mistake? Arrogance. Richmond scanned the distance. Nothing moved. Kavarna-4's sky had always been a pale rust color. Today it looked bruised. Can you hit it? With what? A rock and a prayer? Solence glanced back toward the old docking platforms. TSV Praga was still dead cold, being fed power by a relay grid built for hydro pumps, not war. The TSV Garrett wasn't even sealed yet. They needed days, but they'd get minutes. You want something to throw at it? McKee said. I know someone crazy enough. They both looked toward the east ridge. David Thomas wiped engine oil from his hands with a torn sleeve and squinted into the wind. He'd been waiting for a reason to matter again, and now a reason had parked itself in low orbit. The plan was simple, not smart, not safe, but simple. They were going to wait for the scout ship to make another low pass. He'd fly out in a retrofitted survey pod, a glorified tin can with a throttle, and use the colony's deflection beacon to ping the ship's attention. Meanwhile, a ground team would set charges beneath the rusted remains of the West Ridge, where the scout had already passed once. The hope? Predict its return angle, lure it lower, and then bring the entire slope down on top of it. High risk, high payoff, real dumb. But that's all they had. David stepped into the pod and sealed the hatch with a sound that reminded him of coffins. Power to guidance. Manual override engaged. He lit the thrusters. The pod shuddered and rose like it didn't want to live. From the surface, the sky shimmered with distortion as the alien scout reappeared. It moved slow, too slow, not from technical limits, but from confidence, like it had already won. Like this was just cleanup. David's pod cut a streak across the sky. The scout banked toward him, interested. Then the ridge exploded. A chain of concussive blasts tore through the slope. Rock and dirt and ancient mining rigs launched into the air like shrapnel. The scout ship jolted, veered sideways. Too late. Its hull clipped the debris, flipped midair, and slammed into the ground like a dropped blade. The sound that followed wasn't an explosion. It was a metal scream. The scout ship twisted, sparked, and lay still. Silence. Then, cheering. Rough, desperate, disbelief-soaked cheering from the bunker monitors, the rooftops, the trenches where civilians with repurposed welders had crouched and prayed. Back in the command center, Solance blinked. Holy shit! It worked! Richmond didn't speak for a second. Then he looked up. Mark that spot. Why? Because that's the first time they bled. Daniel saw it from the bunker monitors. Grainy, shaky footage, but clear enough. For the first time since the sky had turned black, he felt something. Not hope. Not joy. Just weight. Like the fear had cracked. Just a little. Scour Commander Threx stood among the wreckage, motionless. The downed scout ship lay cracked open across the ridge, its hull blackened, inner panels still bleeding sparks. Varkeen retrieval drones hissed as they hovered above the blast crater, lifting twisted metal in slow, precise arcs. Wind swept across the slope, lifting plumes of powdered stone into the air like mist. The humans had buried a ridge to kill a scout. 6 dead, 1 unrecovered. That was not the behavior of prey. Threx rotated one cranial arc, the bone-like crown flexing with a faint click. He observed the surrounding landscape, not for threat, but for harvest potential. Mineral density was moderate. Organic presence scattered but viable. Burn efficiency calculations flashed across his retinal feed. Transmission analysis, Threx said aloud. Orbit relayed the data instantly. The humans had broadcast again. Same pulse signature, same trajectory. No answer. They are still waiting, he thought. He clicked once more and turned to a smaller figure crouched near the wreck. Extraction technician Vel, fleshlight tools snaking into the corpse of the fallen scout. Report. Mass pattern disruption, unstructured assault, improvised vectoring, high-risk density. And survivable? Vel paused. Chitinous plates shifted across his back. Not to this vessel. Threx tilted his head, process the crew, strip the wreck, bury the location. To conceal it? No. To remind them. We're not explorers. We're harvesters. 3 days had passed since the second broadcast. 3 days of nothing. No answer, no rescue, no ping. But something had changed. Not in orbit. Below the dirt. The people of Kavarna 4 were moving. Daniel stood near the edge of the salvage trench, boots half submerged in ash and slag. He watched the adults work, ripping wiring out of the downed scout ship, shouting across the yard, sweat running in sheets down soot-covered necks. One woman used a mining torch to slice off what looked like a sensor cluster. Another man cradled a half-destroyed weapon mount like it was an infant. No one cried anymore. That was the change. In the distance, the skeletal shape of TSV Praga still loomed over the dry dock, its reactor humming low and steady now, held together by welds, patches, and fury. You're in the way, kid. Daniel flinched and stepped aside. McKee Solance strode past him carrying a plasma coupler on one shoulder and a rail of cable across the other. You want to help? Good. Grab a stabilizer from the back wall. Red core, no labels. Bring it to Base 6. Yes, sir. Solance didn't answer. He was already shouting orders to someone else. At the western valley edge, Counselor Richmond surveyed what remained of the irrigation towers. 3 were gone. Burned from orbit. Not clean strikes, but shallow, wasteful ones. The kind of fire you use to send a message. The Varkeen weren't trying to win. They were trying to starve them into giving up. A comms tech approached, hesitating at the edge of the rubble pile. Counselor, we tried a 3rd signal. And? Still nothing. Richmond was silent for a moment. Then, keep sending. Even if no one's answering? Especially then. In a converted maintenance hangar, David Thomas sat with 5 new recruits. 2 miners, a mechanic, 1 ex-pilot with tremors, and a teenager with welding goggles too big for his face. A battered holotable flickered in the middle of the room, displaying basic topography. "We're not flying sorties," David said. "Neither Praga nor Garrett would survive a jump, but they can still move, still fight. We're bait. We make the Varkeen look the wrong way while Praga fires from the ridge. We buy Solent's time to finish the jamming. We keep them off the bunkers. Got it?" They nodded. No one asked how likely they were to survive. The beacon was reactivated that night. Daniel stood at the base of the tower with Solance, who cursed every third wire and muttered about signal harmonics and dead gods. The power surged once, failed, then surged again. A thin whine vibrated through the mountain, and then a light blinked red at the tip of the antenna. "There, beacon's online." "It's crying again," he muttered, not that anyone's listening. Solans kept his eyes locked on the telemetry feed, scanning signal strength across all bands. Something wasn't right. The signal's clean, but it's bouncing. He tapped the screen, zoomed in, frowned. That's not distance decay. That's active interference, reflection, jamming, intentional. Daniel swallowed. "You mean they're blocking it?" "Yeah," Solans said. "First time, maybe it went through. Maybe Nova 3 got it and just can't reach us. Or maybe there's nothing left out there to answer. So what do we do?" Solans sighed. "Two options. One, we get inside one of their ships, use their own systems to punch a signal back out. Risky as hell. And the other?" He looked up at the tower, then at the faint shape of Praga, glowing under floodlights in the distance. Pray that old rust bucket's reactor stabilizes long enough to scream louder than they can block. Back in orbit, Scour Commander Threx watched the human signal fragment across the upper atmosphere. Clean, sharp, insistent. He muted the feed. "The prey repeats its cry," a drone reported. "Not a cry," Threx replied. "A test. They are seeking breach vectors." "Shall we reinforce the jamming field?" "No. Let them adapt. Let them waste time and breath. It does not change the outcome." He turned back to the surface displays. Towers marked, fields burned, energy signatures shifting near the human vessel. Shift primary attention to the southern ridge. Reduce all food systems. Destroy any tower not directly involved in surrender. Then, with a pause, begin secondary sorting protocol. Clarify. Mark resistant flesh. We will study why it moves. The wind carried no scent, no sound, just heat and ash, and the long, dull silence of survival. Fields that once grew maize and root crop were now black glass under a dead sun. The Varkeen had scrubbed the atmosphere again, not enough to kill outright, just enough to punish. The colony's perimeter sensors gave a low, pulsing hum. They were coming back. But this time, so were the humans. "They fly lazy," Solent said, crouched low over a slope of ruined solar paneling. "Like they're bored. That's your opening." David Thomas didn't respond. He just nodded, chewing the inside of his cheek as his eyes followed the steady arc of the Varkeen skimmer overhead. A sleek, crescent-shaped shadow, moving in long, predatory loops. "Relay ship," Solance added. "That's where the jamming's coming from. Every time it passes, we lose 5 more bands." David's jaw twitched. How big a boom to ground it? Solance held up a finger, then 2. "Boom's easy. Keeping it alive enough to use? That's the trick." David checked his slate. 2 of his team crouched in the dust ahead, setting charge clusters into the base of the gully. Riggers, volunteers, the kind who didn't mind dying if the story was worth it. Daniel stood nearby, out of place and unarmed, watching like he always did. Too quiet, too curious. McKee Solance, tall, grizzled, grease-stained, stood beside him, muttering curses at the signal jammers. "Hope this thing's got a spine," Solance growled. "We need its teeth." The ambush fired 12 seconds late. The heat dummy, a stripped welding drone radiating minor core thermal, fooled the skimmer just long enough. It dipped, turned, slowed. That's when the charges blew. The gully ruptured upward, not inward. Plasma flame licked the underbelly of the ship. Its shield shimmered, then failed. Metal screamed. The Varkeen relay skimmer spun, listed, and hit the ground like a severed limb. It didn't explode. It bled. The wreck hissed. Steam and fluid poured from biovents. Panels pulsed. The ship's exterior didn't crack. It tensed, like muscle flinching under a blade. David led the breach. Plasma cutters, rail hooks, emergency foam sealants. Solance and a helper followed, masks on. Daniel hesitated, but only once. The inside of the Varkeen ship was wrong. The floor flexed. The walls pulsed in waves of low red light. Tubes lined the hallways like veins, filled with clear liquid and twitching wire. Doors opened when they were touched, not unlocked, but obeying. Daniel nearly turned back. "In here," the helper barked. "Solance, I need cover. Kid, stay behind me. Don't touch anything." They found the node 4 chambers in. It looked like a heart, roughly the size of a melon, woven into a fleshy column of pulsating cables and organic steel. It throbbed in time with a distant sound, like breathing. "This is it," Solance whispered. "Core pulse. Reroute this, and we can scream through jamming. Straight to Nova 3. Through stars, even." He started cutting. That's when the ship reacted. The pulse quickened. Lights shifted to violet. A screech echoed from deeper inside. Not an alarm. A voice. The node fought back. A spray of liquid arced from the base conduit, chemical, boiling, alive. It hit Solance full in the face, hands and neck. He screamed and dropped, clawing at his skin as the substance burned through fabric and flesh. Daniel froze. The helper pulled Solance back, swearing, dragging him behind a seal line. "Node's rigged," he shouted. "Defense reflex." David fired a blast into a nearby wall, giving them cover. The others retreated. Daniel didn't. He stepped forward, hands shaking. The node trembled, still pulsing. Waiting. He reached for the cutter. Wires hissed. Pressure shifted. The whole room watched him. He cut once, then again. The node shrieked in his hands, not loud, but inside his skull, a metallic pulse. He screamed, dropped to one knee, cut again. Then it released. It slid from the column like a dislodged tooth. Wet, hot, still beating. He cradled it in both arms, staggered backward and ran. They made it out with 30 seconds to spare. Varkeen drones hit the crash site 2 minutes later. No survivors to find. Only the gouges of human boots and blood. Back at the colony, Solance lay sedated and wrapped in medical foam. Burned, scarred, one eye ruined, hands curled and fused. The helper worked silently to stabilize the node's biofeedback. Daniel sat beside them, arms burned, knuckles split, eyes locked on the still glowing orb. Later on, Solance came back from sedation. "You saw everything," he rasped. "You followed it." Daniel nodded. Solance gave the faintest smile, even through the pain. "Then you and the helper are my hands now, just till I get mine back." Far above, inside orbit, Threx watched the telemetry. "Relay Unit Vi-7 lost," the drone announced. "Ground team breach confirmed. Bio-node integrity. Compromised." Threx clicked his mandibles once. "They want to talk." He turned to the orbital cannon telemetry. "Let's remind them of the consequences of speech." The Varkeen thought silence would kill them. No bombs, no screams, just a sky that watched and did nothing. Since the crash and the node recovery, the Varkeen had gone quiet, a silence colder than any firestorm. But under the gutted shell of the comms bunker, Daniel was still speaking. He sat cross-legged beside the Varkeen node, the alien organ pulsing under cables and coolant veins. His fingers tapped out a new burst sequence on a jury-rigged interface. One Solance had built from the remains of 3 transmitters and a surgical laser. The signal jumped across scavenged wires and hacked harmonics, slipped through Varkeen, jamming like a rat through rusted pipes. Pulse, pause, pulse, pause, send. Daniel leaned forward, waiting for nothing, as usual. Across the bay, Meki Solance lay half upright in a modified med frame. Foam wraps around his neck and shoulders, skin split in long lines where the node's biodefense had scorched him. "Again," he said, voice dry and hoarse. Daniel looked up. "Already did. Then do it again. Change the header. Flip the carrier tone. Rebuild the burst structure. You're not just sending. You're threading a needle blindfolded while it's spinning." Daniel nodded, made the changes, and hit send again. The node pulsed, faint blue, almost shy. "Better," Solance whispered. "They won't see that one coming." He coughed once, winced, and closed his eyes. Outside the bunker, the colony moved like it believed in tomorrow, but only barely. The Praga had power. Not weapons yet, but lift and thrusters and nav control. Its ancient cannon, a forward-mounted spinal railgun, was nearly rebuilt, using stripped industrial parts and stripped-down sanity. The Garrett had shielding. Half of one, anyway. Richmond oversaw her systems personally, his jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. Welders worked by hand, not drones. Those were all gone. Gunners trained on empty housings. No one talked about odds. Odds were for rich planets. Every engine ignition echoed like a heartbeat. The Varkeen circled far above, sending only scouts now. Their jamming hadn't stopped, but it hadn't changed either. They thought the colony was broken, crippled, choking in its own static. That was the mistake, because Daniel didn't stop. Solance trained him without mercy. "Your message isn't a scream, it's a lockpick," he said one morning. "Precision, no emotion, no rhythm they can track. You think they don't listen? They listen to everything. They study it, feel it. If it feels human, they kill it." Daniel didn't answer. He was already building a new pattern. The node was pulsing brighter now, responding to him faster. "Good," Solance muttered. "It likes you." Daniel didn't like it back. The thing was warm and wet and too alive. But it worked, and it was the only voice they had left. Day 5. David Thomas came down from dry dock with grime in his eyes and metal dust in his beard. "We're gonna fire test the Praga tomorrow. If it doesn't blow up the spine, we've got one gun." "Onboard targeting?" Solance asked. "Dead, manual." Solance tried to laugh, then winced as the pain caught up. "Human as hell," he said. Day 6. Solance's hands twitched, reflexes coming back, painkillers lowered. He tried to reach the terminal once, failed. "Don't need me anymore," he told Daniel. "You're doing it." Daniel didn't stop typing. "You're not going anywhere." "Wasn't a compliment, kid. Just fact." Day 7. Another burst. A new angle. Carrier wave compressed through a harmonic shell Daniel made himself. It felt clean, strong, different. He hesitated, then hit send. The node reacted, stiffened, glowed hard. Daniel blinked. That was weird. Solance opened one eye. "Wait!" Seconds passed. Then, a response. Not a clean one, garbled, bleeding through static and harmonics. But there, a voice, staggered, machine-chopped and raw. "Kavarna 4, repeat. Signal received. Nova 3 actual. Relief mobilizing. ETA, hold, hold." Then it died. Daniel sat frozen. Solance stared at the wall, not breathing, Outside, the sky was still quiet, but the silence was broken. Silence shattered. The node's reply had been brief, glitched, choppy, but no one doubted it. The message had been received. Nova 3 heard them. Help was coming. For a few seconds, the war paused. Inside the bunker, no one spoke. Not Solence, not Daniel, not the relay crew. The only sound was the slow, steady pulse of the alien node and Daniel's shaking breath. Solence exhaled like a man unclenching after days underwater. "They got it," he whispered. "They got it." Daniel nodded, fingers still on the keyboard. "They're coming!" And for the first time in days, the air didn't feel like it was pressing down to crush them. Across the valley, people emerged from bunkers, drawn by the noise in the relay towers. They'd heard the signal. Glitched, broken, but real. Eyes wide, dirty hands lifted to the pale sky. They didn't understand every word, but they knew what it meant. Help was coming, and something had changed. Counselor Harlan Richmond stood atop the colony's comm tower, now nothing but a jagged frame, watching TSV Praga's skeleton hum with final tests. He didn't smile, didn't move, but his jaw shifted once. That was enough. "Status?" he asked over the private line. "Garrett's reactor's stable," David Thomas reported. "Can't guarantee full thrust, but she'll move." "Praga?" Richmond asked. The tech crew scrambled in the background, tightening armor plates with arc welders, calibrating the old spinal cannon by hand. "Final checks. One engine's twitchy. We stripped half her housing to balance the weight." Richmond grunted. If it flies and shoots, it's a warship. Down in the hangar, the TSV Garrett groaned as her core warmed. David Thomas walked the deck barefoot, feeling the vibration through his feet. "That's new," said one of the engineers. "Used to fly hoppers like this," he muttered. "You feel her mood in the bones before the instruments catch it." He placed a hand on the cold wall. "Still pissed, but she'll fly." In the converted comms bay, Solence coughed hard into a rag. The meds were running low. The pain came in waves now. But he refused the stretcher. He watched Daniel reroute another data cycle from the Varkeen node to the upper deck relays. "You're doing it right," Solence said, voice thin. Daniel didn't answer. His face was pale, eyes fixed, jaw tight. "You okay, kid?" "I'm fine," he lied. Outside, children carried tools. Old men helped lay comm cables. No one waited for orders anymore. They knew what was coming. Even the skies felt heavier. An hour later, the sirens went off, short, blunt, one tone only. "Incoming." Daniel flinched. So did everyone else. Up above, Richmond squinted through a pair of old signal binoculars. In the far atmosphere, light shimmered, long, sharp streaks falling fast. "Varkeen, at least 10. No prelude, no probe," he said over comms. "They're not scouting." "They're coming to finish it," Solence muttered. "Let them try," Thomas said, already sealing Garrett's hatch. In the control bay, the final engines warmed. In the hangars, hands gripped metal, shoulders tensed, breath held. On the open plain outside the colony, the last engineers stepped back as the engines of Praga lit up with a rising, thunderous growl. She hovered for a second, then slowly, violently, lifted off the ground. She rose. Black smoke trailed behind her, from the patched engine core, from the gap still oozing heat. But she flew. Then Garrett followed. They rose like wounded animals. TSV Praga groaned first, her hull vibrating with uneven thrust as the repulsors kicked in. A deep, guttural hum rippled through the valley as her landing gear retracted for the first time in almost 2 decades. Dust spiraled in thick, choking curtains as the ship lifted into Kavarna 4's bruised sky, her patched hull glinting under the pale light. Then came Garrett, slower, heavier, her left side already venting coolant as she strained against gravity, driven forward by sheer defiance and half a functioning core. The colony below stood still. Even the children knew what this meant. There was no speech, no anthem, just two battered ships clawing their way toward orbit, and the Varkeen already coming down. In Garrett's cockpit, David Thomas gripped the manual throttle with one hand, the other resting on the cannon trigger. He wore no helmet, no harness, just grit and decades of flying things that shouldn't fly. "Praga, this is Garrett," he said. "If we die, you owe me a beer." Praga's reply came through static. Richmond's voice, dry, flat. "I already owe you a planet. Let's make it worth something." Above them, the Varkeen scout wing broke formation. 10 ships, organic, slick, and spear-shaped, began their descent. Staggered in a high-orbit pincer. No warning shot. No message. Just kill. "Targets locked," Thomas muttered. "Distance closing." Inside Garrett, the crew scrambled. One man feeding shells into the cannon by hand. Another rewiring targeting with exposed copper. A third using a child's tablet as a heat monitor. The ship wasn't ready, but humans fought ready or not. The first pass came fast. 3 Varkeen strikers dove in, their plasma lances tearing clouds into vapor as they released white-hot beams. Praga rolled hard to starboard, her lower hull catching a glancing blow. Metal screamed. Fire flared along the outer fin. "Direct hit! No breach!" someone shouted. Inside Praga, Richmond stood braced at the central rail, barking orders like artillery. "Cycle shields manually. Rote auxiliary to bow. Get me forward vision now." The ship shuddered again. TSV Garrett returned fire. A long, slow burn from her cannon. The round missed by a kilometer. "Too far," Thomas said, lips tight. "Time to cheat." He cut engines. Garrett fell, fast and on purpose. Freefall spun her sideways. The Varkeen weren't ready for that. As they adjusted course to track, Garrett fired a point-blank slug right through the lead striker's wing cluster. The alien ship lurched, flared, and tore itself apart in a shower of acid and flame. Thomas kicked the engines back online. Gravity crushed him, and Garrett screamed with him. 1 kill. "Mark it," Richmond said from Praga. "We bleed them until Nova gets here." "Copy," Thomas breathed. "Bleeding in progress." Then came the second wave. Larger ships, not scouts. Interceptors, each one the size of a colony hauler, bristling with multi-beam arrays and something that looked like it fed on energy and bone. One peeled off toward the colony. "Redirect it!" Richmond snapped. Praga surged forward, coughing black smoke from her main vent. Her spinal railgun charged, barely stable. "Now or never," the gunner muttered. They fired. The slug punched through the interceptor's outer hull. Not enough to kill it, but enough to make it angry. It turned. "Congratulations," Richmond muttered. "You got its attention." Inside Garrett, a Varkeen lance sliced through the port bulkhead. Fire erupted. 2 crew went down. Thomas didn't slow. He spun the ship again, letting inertia carry them beneath the Varkeen vessel's blind spot. One of the mechanics crawled into the exposed ductwork and dropped a mining charge into the cooling intake of the enemy ship. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sunrise. 2 kills. Still they came. The Varkeen didn't understand retreat. They understood conquest. And now, confusion. Their scans told them this colony had no fleet, no weapons, no trained soldiers. And yet here were 2 ships, screaming defiance in a dead sky, fighting like predators that had run out of prey. In the relay bunker, Daniel sat beside the pulsing node, headphones on, repeating bursts, redirecting signals from ship to ship, voice calm, but eyes wide. "Praga, rerouting targeting uplink. Sync with Garrett. You've got 9 seconds. Solence, behind him, still in recovery, barked, "Use the Varkeen wreckage as cover. Bounce the signal. They're blind to their own corpses." Daniel nodded. "Done." They moved like one. Outside, Praga and Garrett crossed paths in a corkscrew turn, slamming atmosphere into static. The maneuver forced 3 more Varkeen to collide in evasion. One went down in flames. Another clipped Garrett's wing and lost its stabilizers. 4 kills. But both human ships were burning now. "We're out of shielding," Thomas said through cracked teeth. Richmond's voice came through, calm. "Then we make sure they run out of courage." As the Varkeen regrouped for another strike, something shifted. The human ships weren't supposed to be here, weren't supposed to last this long, weren't supposed to fight like this. From orbit, Scour Commander Threx watched the chaos unfold. His mandibles clicked in quiet confusion. "These are not war machines," he hissed to his second. "No, Commander," the subordinate replied, "but they are still fighting." The sky was falling in slabs of flame. Above Kavarna 4, everything was chaos. Static streaked across the comms, metal screamed through Atmo, and the colony's defense grid, never designed for this, flickered, coughed, and died in pulses. The few ground cannons still firing traced weak arcs into the sky, barely slowing the Varkeen's precision strikes. 2 ships cut against that backdrop like defiance incarnate. Garrett burning fast. Praga already trailing smoke. Praga's ventral plating peeled back like wet paper. One of the Varkeen's plasma spears slammed through her midsection. A full penetration. Air and fire jetted from the wound, and secondary explosions punched through her rear stabilizers. She spun wildly. Inside, bulkheads slammed shut on emergency protocols. Lights snapped out. Systems died. Screams filled her corridors. Counselor Harlan Richmond didn't scream. He hit the deck hard when the impact came, smashing his shoulder and twisting his leg beneath a collapsed conduit. Alarms howled. Red emergency lights turned everything into hellfire. "Status!" he roared through a mouthful of blood, forcing himself upright. No answer. Just groans. Static. And fire. On the bridge, a crewman slammed the final lockdown as atmosphere vented behind them. His eyes were wide, trembling, but his hands didn't shake. "We're not holding altitude, sir. No repulsors, no vectored thrust." "Put her down," Richmond ordered. "Anywhere that doesn't kill us outright." Praga's hull groaned like it wanted to quit. But she listened. Down she went, a dying meteor streaking back toward the planet that had never been meant to host a war. The crash shook half the colony. Praga slammed down just beyond the industrial rim, kicking up molten dirt and shattered ore. Her frame twisted, dug into the crust, and came to rest in fire and ruin. But she did not explode. Garrett flew through her smoke trail. From the pilot's seat, David Thomas stared out through the canopy as Praga fell beneath them. "Praga, respond." No reply. "Richmond, you alive down there?" A flicker of static. Then Richmond's voice, dry and dark with pain. "Still breathing. Then listen close. We're finishing this." Richmond was pulled out by 2 survivors. His leg was broken, his coat singed, but he still barked orders. "Clear the decks. Get every survivor to fallback bunkers. Now!" Overhead, another Varkeen ship passed low. Plasma beams sprayed the dirt nearby. One struck Praga's flank, but her wreckage held. "That all you got, you bastard?" Richmond growled. In orbit. Garrett turned. Every system lit red. Hull integrity was down to 42%. Weapons were overheating. 2 decks had been sealed off due to decompression. Half the crew was bleeding, bruised, or braced for death. David Thomas didn't hesitate. "Bring us around. Target the big one." The Varkeen command ship was sitting above the battle, unmoving. It pulsed with a cold, biomechanical rhythm, a black fortress, draped in light. "You mean to hit it?" someone asked. "I mean to kill it," Thomas said, "one way or another." Sir, we don't have the mass. We have enough. And a spine made of human spite. Back in the bunker, Daniel watched as the alien jamming returned, stronger now. He looked at Solance. We're not getting through again, are we? Solance coughed once, hard. We've done our part, Kit. It's up to them now. In orbit, Garrett accelerated. Full burn. Thomas pushed the throttle forward manually. The deck groaned. The main thrusters spat fury. Divert all remaining power to the nose armor, he said. We're not surviving this, so we might as well hit hard. The Varkeen ships closed in. Escorts, interceptors, drones. One fired a beam that sheared part of Garrett's dorsal housing. Another clipped her wing, sending metal spiraling into the void. Still, Garrett flew. Straight. Unflinching. Inside the Varkeen command ship, Scour Commander Threx watched the feed with 4 pupils dilated. They're not maneuvering, said his second. No, Threx said. They're not. A beat. Another officer hissed in alarm. Commander, they're accelerating straight for us! Threx's mandibles clicked open. His tone was flat. They seek collision? They intend to die, Commander. With us. No reply. Threx just stared at the human vessel, burning, failing, and still coming. On board Garrett, Thomas locked the controls. Tell the crew to brace. Tell them thanks. Down on the ground, Richmond looked up. Praga's wreckage still steamed behind him. Blood ran down the side of his face. He watched Garrett's trail cross the clouds. He knew what Thomas was doing. You beautiful bastard. Then space tore open. It didn't explode. It folded. Ribbons of blue light split the horizon, and out of the breach came steel. Dozens of hulls. Terran issue. Carriers. Destroyers. Frigates. A fleet. The air itself pulsed with re-entry fire as Nova 3's Vanguard dropped into orbit. Garrett's console blinked. Incoming transmission. Garrett, this is Commander Adra of Nova 3. We have you on scope. Abort run. Pull off. We'll take it from here. Thomas laughed. It wasn't a joyful sound, more like a man letting go of a weight that's been crushing his lungs for days. He grabbed the stick, pulled hard. The nose of the ship jerked away from the command vessel. The collision never came. Inside the Varkeen war bridge, Threx stared at the new arrivals. Behind him, lights flickered. His officers froze. One whispered, "What are they?" Threx said nothing. He just stared into the void, where now he was not the hunter. But the cornered... When the Nova 3 fleet dropped into orbit, it didn't arrive with ceremony. It punched through the dark like a blade through wet cloth. 1 second, the Varkeen fleet ruled the sky. The next, they were surrounded. 6 Terran destroyers fanned into formation, flanking 3 carriers, each trailing gunship swarms already peeling into atmosphere. 2 dreadnoughts held the rear, their shadows eclipsing stars, bristling with weaponry, their hulls adorned with the silver sigil of Earthfleet Command. Scour Commander Threx stood still, staring at the shifting formation of Terran vessels. His inner eyelids flicked rapidly, calculating. "They are positioning," one of his sub-commanders hissed. "This is not a broadcast, it's a hunt," said an officer. Threx's lower mandibles twitched. "Return fire." "At what? Which?" "Pick one." The Varkeen opened fire first. Plasma lances leapt from their flanks, burning white, shrieking in vacuum. But the Terrans had already moved. Nova 3's destroyers split like teeth around a jaw, fanning outward, forcing the Varkeen to divide their targeting. The humans didn't speak. They struck. A Nova destroyer known only by its hull code, CHV 2137, led the first assault. Its captain, nameless to history, dropped 2 magnetic harpoons into the belly of a Varkeen interceptor, fired thrusters in reverse, and tore the alien ship in half without firing a single round. Behind it, 3 gunships wove between Varkeen lines like snakes. Every beam they fired cut armor and bone. One Varkeen corvette spiraled out of control, collided with its wingmate, and exploded into a storm of molten chitin. Then came the dreadnoughts, and the sky cracked open. From orbit, Kavarna 4's civilians watched the clouds light up like daytime. Even through fire-scorched glass, Richmond could see them. Terran gunships diving past the ridge, ripping Varkeen escorts apart in coordinated lines. Every strike was precise, every maneuver purposeful. This wasn't a last stand anymore. It was a tactical annihilation. On the ground, Daniel stood outside the bunker with Solance, both shielding their eyes. "Is that them?" "Yep. Nova 3, Solance said. "They came," Daniel whispered. "Damn right they did." In orbit, chaos reigned. The Varkeen fleet buckled. Their formation shattered. Drones began breaking away without orders. Even their boarding claws, usually launched into hulls to shred ships from within, fired blind, without aim. The Terrans countered everything. Gunships strafed Atmo control nodes. Corvettes lured Varkeen frigates into overlapping fire zones. One carrier deployed a rail platform mid-drift, turned it sideways, and speared a Varkeen cruiser through its spine. Thrax watched it all. Watched as his war fleet, bred over generations, was unraveled in minutes. "Commander," his second said quietly, "there are no reinforcements." "No. Then we must—" "Humans will never forget what we've done here," Threx said, voice like cracked obsidian. "And if we die now, we will learn nothing." He activated the FTL beacon. "Mark this frequency," he ordered. "Record everything we've seen. Their tactics, their failures, their fury." "And the ships they used to hold the line?" the second asked. "Do we include them?" Threx paused. Mandibles clicked once. "Especially them." Then the beacon flared, and the Varkeen command ship vanished into FTL, the last of its kind. In orbit, debris rained down like ash, dozens of burning hulls, no escape pods, no signals, just death, earned and delivered. The Nova 3 fleet held position. Above the scorched colony, their formation tightened. No longer an arrival. A shield. Then came the signal. Inside the colony's command bunker, lights flickered. Consoles buzzed. An incoming transmission, flagged high priority, blinked across the emergency uplink. Then a voice. Calm, steady, human. "This is Fleet Commander Adra, Nova 3 Strategic Response Group. To the people of Kavarna 4, we received your signal. We saw what you did, what you endured, what you survived. Let it be known, this colony will never stand alone again. An orbital military platform is en route. You will have early warning, air defense, and a permanent garrison. Your courage bought that." A pause. Nova 3 out. Down in the ground, Richmond watched the clouds part above them. Gunships passed overhead, slow, like guardians. Not hunting, patrolling. He coughed once, wincing, then looked toward the horizon. Smoke, broken domes, dead friends. And still, the colony survived. Inside a comms tent, Daniel stared up at the signal tower, now glowing again. "You think they'll come again?" he asked. Solance answered, "Not anytime soon." High above them, the orbital ring began to form. Gunmetal. Silent. Watching. A shield earned by a bastard colony, and two broken ships that stood when no one else would.